Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PHLY Eagles podcast from Mobile, Alabama. I am Wulf, joined by Zach Berman. Zach, how are you?
I'm doing great. Excited to see you. A little bit of FOMO, I got to admit.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what you're doing.
Oh, this is my Clint Hurt impression.
Oh, all right. I was wondering why your picture changed. We can get to that, but yeah, I got to admit, I talk to Emily sometimes when she has FOMO about like social stuff. I don't get that, but definitely have that regarding the Senior Bowl because I see all these pictures on Instagram and on Twitter, and I'm watching the whole practice, and wish I was there. So eager to talk to you about what's going on down there.
Well, you did a great job running things with Handsome Rich yesterday. That was a fun episode to listen to. So I hope you're doing well. I hope Emily's doing well.
I appreciate that. You had the pillow in your shirt there. That's probably the biggest news that's going on in Philly that came out last
That
week.
I had a pillow?
That according to the NFL Network, the Eagles are adding Clint Hurt, former Seahawks defensive coordinator, as their defensive line coach, who has a long history with Vic Fangio. They were together in Chicago. And then also, we don't know the capacity yet for Carl Scott, but comes over. He has a background in defensive backs and presumably will be in some variety there, working with the D-backs. So this staff continues to fill out, but a lot of changes still left to be done.
Now, here's my take on that, Zach. And we've got some interviews from practice coming up as this episode goes on. We're going to talk to Dane Brugler. We're going to talk to Olivia Reiner from the Inquirer. And then on the PHLY YouTube feed, you will see a bit of a longer interview with Jimmy Kempski from Philly Voice. And I brought this up to Jimmy. But, Zach, imagine that you are Sean Desai and you have been fired midseason by the Eagles in favor of Matt Patricia, a not good defensive coordinator. You've also been forced to suffer the ignominy of not just getting to leave, but having to be promoted upstairs and like a camera on you the whole time. So you can't really show your emotions. You have to go through this whole thing and pretend to be a good soldier as the defense flounders without you and looks like the worst defense in football. Then a week after the season's over, you are the ceremonial person thrown to the wolves as, oh, okay, Nick Sirianni has decided to fire Sean Desai and has been the one to make the call. This is the first piece of news that leaks out, and you've already been fired. And then you are replaced permanently by your mentor. And then he fills out his staff with the guys who you just worked with 2 years ago.
I hear you.
Poor guy.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's a few things in there that strike me as like the most egregious. One being that they had to do the charade of him being the defensive coordinator for competitive advantage that week, and then they didn't want to announce that Nick was coming back, but that they used him dismissing. Him dismissing Sean Desai as a way of saying
what did he do to deserve this? He's just been dragged through the mud the whole time.
Yeah, that Nick was coming back. The part about like him being replaced by his mentor and then putting the Seahawks staff together. I hear you, and like that sucks. There's also a part of that where that's the business they chose, right? And like Sean Desai knew
just a year ago, sprinkles on top of the crap Sunday.
Yeah. Sean Desai knew a year ago that the Eagles wanted Vic Fangio, right? That Vic Fangio thing is, there's been reporting that has come out since then that it went sour in Miami. So presumably the Eagles would try to pounce. Like we talked about Fangio as a possibility even before he was dismissed by the Dolphins because those rumors had come out. So that part of it, it kind of compounds with all the other stuff. But the other stuff, in particular, the charade before the Seattle game, and then the Nick fired Sean part of it, that part's unbecoming to me.
So what do you make of the Clint Hurt and Carl Scott of it?
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that you're adding guys with legit NFL experience here, right? I thought the Eagles staff was a little thin on that, and not to say that it's a prerequisite, right? You always need your first chance, but I even spoke to you last year about how at all three levels they had guys other than Tracy Rocker, who before coming to Philly, I think had 1 or 2 years with the Titans, but their D-backs coach, their linebackers coach, it was like their first time coaching at the position coach level in the NFL. And that you didn't necessarily have that established experience. Although I suppose that's an oxymoron, or I suppose it's redundant because experience within itself is established. But the experience that was there before, and certainly Clint Hurt, right, a defensive coordinator in the league, established position coach in the league, that gives you somebody who comes with those credentials. Carl Scott's been around a bit in the league, was on Nick Saban's staff at Alabama. What we spoke as we spoke last week, them, speaking to Barry gives them that's potential linebacker coach experience with coordinator experience. Mike Caldwell would fit that as well. So I look at that as really beefing up the defensive coaching staff. No pun.
Yeah, it's what we talked about last week about how last year they were at the end of the hiring cycle. And so all of the positions were filled across the league, whereas now they're at the forefront of it and they have a chance to beef up those spots given all the turnover elsewhere. I do worry just a little bit about are they going too far? Like if they hire Mike Caldwell too, and it's like two defensive coordinators and Carl Scott, who's established. And what if they hire a former offensive coordinator as the quarterback's coach? Like, is that too much? Like, is that too many egos to manage for guys who are going to have to be subservient in some degree? And like, can they all be good soldiers and pull in the same direction when they've all been in bigger jobs in the past? I don't know. Presumably you want like a couple guys who are like young and scrappy and trying to prove themselves for the first time. I don't know. I mean, it's all a very inexact science.
Yeah, I do think though they needed different than what they had last year in terms of that experience. And I remember talking to Nick about the benefit of having those with college coaching backgrounds. It wasn't necessarily targeted, but there's a lot of like emphasis on fundamentals when you're coaching in college as opposed to maybe scheme and game plan related stuff. That might be a generalization, but it is the case here that I look at Doug's initial staff, which was a really good staff. Ken Flagel was a former defensive coordinator in the league, like had those bona fides. And when you have that across the board here, it really does give you a strong established coaching staff. And I suppose you can say maybe, too strong for Nick, but I don't think that's the case. Nick's entering year 3. Oh, I'm sorry, entering year 4. He's been to the Super Bowl. And yeah, he is coaching for his job, if you will, but Nick's not a first-time coach anymore. And I think Nick can handle it personally.
Well, the other thing that is interesting here is in terms of the personality dynamics. One thing we've always heard about Nick is that he's tough on the coaches, right? He coaches the coaches hard. And part of the reason that he had the equity to do that is because he had so much loyalty, and that has changed now. But as much as he is supposedly going to be like hands off on the defense now, is that also the case with the position coaches? And so like Nick doesn't have the earned equity with Clint Hurt or Carl Scott to come in and be hard on them if like they're Fangio guys, right? Like I am probably just being like pessimistic and a little bit reactionary. I don't know what the right word is, but like it seems like it's setting up the classic offense versus defense dynamic where like things can get a little bit combative.
Perhaps, I don't know. Yeah.
Again,
I actually think what it does.
Pure speculation.
Sure. I think what it does is actually almost the other way around, is that I think sometimes you need assistant coaches and position coaches who can push back to, that who can offer their own ideas. And I think one of the problems with having the internal pipeline, because I like that idea of the internal pipeline. Doug Peterson talked to me about it. Nick Sirianni has talked about it. The problem is, and I've spoke about this specifically with Doug, is that you have people who are then indebted to you, right? Like their breaks in their career are coming because of you. And are you getting the type of pushback you need? Are you getting enough contrarian voices or different voices in the room when you have people who go from, quality control coach to assistant position coach to position coach, and it's all because of you, right? So I think when you do have those strong voices from elsewhere, it's beneficial. Now, it's also potentially combustible, but that's why Nick's paid the big bucks. Is it's your job to manage this coaching staff and to be the head coach of a coaching staff.
All right, and so that leaves, Zach, from what we can tell, you mentioned the guys they interviewed for linebackers coach. Presumably that will be filled. We don't yet know if Jeremiah Washburn is going to stay on, if they want to continue to have a separate coach for the edge rushers versus the defensive line. We haven't heard anything on the quarterbacks coach front yet. We'll try to sniff around that here at Mobile, but no word yet. And still no official announcements on the rest of the offensive position coaches yet.
If I can interject real quick, because I have a list of things I want to ask you, and one is that I keep scanning social media for like pictures of Eagles people there, and I remember vividly we're watching practice 2 years ago, and we see Julian Lurie with Jeff Stoutland and Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman, and they're all watching practice together. And there's a handful of Eagles reporters down there, obviously you included. And I haven't seen those pictures of the Eagles staff. Are the Eagles well represented there? Are they late arriving? How would you characterize that?
So the Eagles footprint here is certainly smaller than it was 2 years ago. Obviously we weren't here last year, and neither were they for the most part because they were still in the playoffs. Yeah. I haven't seen any coaches. No Eagles coaches are here so far, which sort of makes sense because they're still figuring out what the staff is going to look like. It wouldn't have been a huge surprise to see like Stoutland down here necessarily.
Exactly.
But it has just been, you see area scouts. Some of those guys are on the field. They've also, it's different I guess they started doing this a couple years ago where the media is supposed to sit on one side of the stadium and then like the team personnel is supposed to sit on the other side of the stadium. Not everybody follows those rules, but so, I have seen Jake Rosenberg on the way down here, Adam Berry, Jeff Scott, a bunch of the area scouts. I heard that Alec Halaby was here. I haven't seen him, but yeah, it's the front office people, the coaching staff. There's no Howie so far, and there's no coaches yet.
And what I find interesting about that is a team like Pittsburgh, for instance, right, who was eliminated at the same time. They are not rebuilding their entire staff, but hiring a new offensive coordinator. I'll spare you the Arthur Smith joke, but Mike Tomlin's there on the sideline today, right? And some teams seem to value having their coaches there more than others. I saw, Tashawn Reed, the outstanding Raiders reporter, he said that their coach Antonio Pierce and their GM Tom Telesco are not there, and that's a team that's drafting high. But they're kind of relying on their scouts and the rest of their front office. So I do know there's a shift in NFL circles with some teams to not have like your coaches on site for this event. The Rams have pulled back from the combine as well. But yeah, like I'm watching today, and I know you and Fran will. Well, am I allowed to say that?
Yeah. Tomorrow, Fran and I will dive into the players who are here and talk a little bit more about that. We'll do the I can't say annual, but the traditional Senior Bowl quackatology.
Yeah, I also shouldn't say, am I allowed to say that on a live show, because like there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube at that point. But no, I'm watching the practices today, and it's a really good group of offensive linemen, relatively speaking, as you pointed out, you have a diehard piece today on first round options that are there, and most of them were offensive linemen. And I mean, it's safe to say Jeff Stoutland's back, right? It would make sense for Jeff Stoutland to see, Tyler Guyton on the field up close. So it did surprise me when I didn't see it. And there was a big deal made, 2 years ago when Julian Lurie was visible there on the sideline watching practice. And we know, Julian's increased role in the franchise. I thought we'd see him there with Howie.
I did not, to be
okay.
honest. I just think it's a priority thing. Like, they have more important things to do right now. Like, if they had nothing else to do, I mean, remember 2 years ago, they retained the entire staff.
Sure.
Like, and so this was priority number one. It's not priority number one right now.
Yeah, I just think once you have your coordinators in place, I don't know. I think I was surprised. I thought we'd see at least Nick down there. Maybe they're coming down for a day, right? They've done that in the past, but yeah, that did surprise me. And the Senior Bowl sometimes used as like a coach interview convention. Specifically in 2016, I believe it was, Chris Wilson was hired down there. The Eagles interviewed Chris Wilson to be their defensive lines coach down there at the Senior Bowl and hired him. So that did strike me a bit as surprising, especially, and I see in the chat, Jason says this is a more stacked Senior Bowl lineup than you see in the past because they're allowing underclassmen to play a little bit more. So you have some, not all your top prospects, but I think a greater volume of better prospects are in there. So that surprised me not having that Eagles representation on the ground.
Well, speaking of what's going on down here, why don't we use this opportunity to throw to the conversation I had with Dane Brugler at the beginning of practice today. So this is before we saw anything that had happened on the field on day one, more of a preview of what was to come. Just a quick check-in with our old friend Dane Brugler from The Athletic.
Everybody, Bo Wulf for PHLY at the Senior Bowl. And I just sat down and I have found the number one guy, the most important person here, Dane Brugler from The Athletic. First of all, Dane, how are you?
I'm good. It's good to be with you. It's a beautiful Mobile. It's going to be 60s today, so you love that.
Yeah, last time I was here, it was raining. Not so great. I want to talk about my favorite name here, which I hope that you will like, but we'll do a couple Eagles questions first. I'll be quick with you here. Give me who you think will come out as the best offensive tackle here.
It's hard not to say Tyler Guyton, Oklahoma right tackle. Just the way he moves is different. It just, is he the most polished? No. The most technically sound? No. But when you project him out, it's easy to get excited about where he could be down the road. So one-on-ones will be interesting for him. See how he holds up. He has the athleticism, no doubt, but is he far enough along in his technique where he's going to be able to hold up against some of the pass rushes we have this week?
I see like the story of him, super athletic guy from Oklahoma. I think if there is a Lane Johnson replacement, that's the guy.
Right. Well, he only played right tackle at Oklahoma. He needs a few courses in Stoutland U, just to get further along than where he is. But again, the draft's all about traits, and this guy's got them.
Okay, second question. I'm thinking a day 2 skill position player, wide receiver or running back, somebody to add a little juice to the Eagles offense. Who's somebody to watch here?
I'm a big fan of Roman Wilson, Michigan wide receiver. He's undersized, but that's why you're getting him on day 2. His speed, his quickness, he can get open. And really, say the same things about Laz McConkey, the Georgia wide receiver. Undersized, been banged up over his career. But again, that's why you're getting him probably midway through day 2, late 2, early 3, as opposed to a guy that's going to go in the top 30. So you trade off the size concerns for a guy that just knows how to get open. And both Roman Wilson and Laz McConkey, both those guys know how to get open. They're very good at the catch point. They can hurt you after the catch. So excited to see both those guys this week.
One more real question. secondary is a need for the Eagles? Anybody here that you really like?
It's got to be Quinyon Mitchell, the Toledo corner. You can make the argument he's the best defensive player here. I think the UCLA pass rusher, Leon Tamatu might have a case, and a few others, but Quinyon Mitchell's right there in the mix. His ball production's outstanding. Coming from the MAC, you want to see him against maybe some better competitions, better wide receivers. We'll see that during one-on-ones. So excited that he's down here to compete and has a chance to really cement himself as a top 25 guy in this round.
All right, you are a family man. You got kids. If you're cooking dinner and you're making Tanner Bortolini, what are you using on the side?
A great Wisconsin center. He's an athletic player. Guard, moved to center this year. He's someone that I think can open some eyes because he's an athlete. He can move. So there's some good names down here.
Good names. And then last question, if you had one day with a time machine, what would you use it for?
Oh, wow. Just in general, like not prospect related?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it could be.
Yeah, go back and fix some of my mock drafts.
That's good.
Gosh, that's a tough question. But yeah, professionally, I could sure use a time machine. Go back in time and fix my Danny Watkins fit, my projection. That maybe Howie would want to do that too.
Yeah, I think that might be the one that he uses it for too. All right, Dan Brugger, thank you so much. We appreciate it. We can all read your work on The Athletic. You are the best.
Thanks, man.
I have a new answer for the time machine, Zach.
Let's hear. How about it? Wait. By the way, great job getting an A-lister to kick off. That is huge down there. Good work. Yeah. So
Time machine. Best.
Yep.
And thanks for hanging with us on the audio. Not perfect, but I think Julia did a great job by cleaning it up, making it work. I would go back to Saturday or Sunday, whenever it was, when there was like one login that was like every time I tried to log into it, like the page crashed and I couldn't get it to fix, and so I cleared my cookies, but I didn't really pay close attention to what I was clearing, and all of my sign-ins for all of the things that I'm signed into, I lost all of them. I got to like figure out what my passwords are, like send myself. It's been such a hassle. So that's what I would change. What a privileged life I've led, but that was it.
I sympathize with you there because we sometimes take for granted the autofill in the password, right? And I understand you can get your password with the autofill, but then once it's out of there, you gotta do the password reminders and the emails. And you think
you've done them all, and then all of a sudden you go to a different. Oh, I forgot about this one. There's no way I know this password. Oh,
exactly. Yep.
Brutal.
Yeah. I can empathize.
The two guys he mentioned, who I think are worth just touching on quickly, Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback from Toledo, a guy who, when he comes in, coming from the MAC, you want to see how he fits in, and you want to see how he moves. And boy, just one practice, he looked awesome. He looked like the best defensive player on the field, and I think he could be a potential possibility for the Eagles at 22. And then Guyton, the guy who is the super athletic right tackle from Oklahoma. You think of him as potentially a Lane Johnson replacement. Needs to put on some muscle. And one way that he could do that, Zach?
Tell me.
We'll put on some weight. He could eat some bagels, some Brooklyn-style bagels made in Philly with Bagels & Co. We're talking huge bagels, the biggest bagels in Philly. They've got a large variety, 15 to 20 different types to choose from daily. They've got seasonal bagels as well. They've got the largest cream cheese variety, 30 different flavors of cream cheese and schmears. And it's an affordable brand, baby. You get a lot of food for cheap. And in today's inflationary world, they think that's key. So, Mr. Guyton, AJ's brother, don't think that's true. For the best Brooklyn-style bagels made right here in Philly, head to www.thebagelsandco.com/store-locator to find the closest Bagels & Co. near you.
And we are going to be in Vegas next week eating bagels, perhaps. But if we're trying to think of how to spend some extra money in Vegas, bagels is one way to do it. What would you do if you had an extra $100 in Vegas?
What would you do?
If you were there for the big game, would you buy yourself a great dinner? Would you put it all on red? Would you would you go to the blackjack table and double down on 11 and hold on 17 and split those 8s? Well, Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. And right now, all users get $100 off when they buy a big game ticket with code Vegas100. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And this isn't just for the big game, by the way. I was looking at tickets for tonight's Villanova game on Game Time, and you can see the seat view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Right now, all Game Time users get a $100 off a big game ticket with code Vegas100. Terms apply. Just download the Game Time app and use code VEGAS100 for $100 off a big game ticket. Or if you're not going to the game, use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
What else is on your mind?
So I know you'll talk about players tomorrow. One thing I want to just run by you real quick when you talk about Mitchell, the D-back from Toledo, because you'll probably get more into evaluation stuff tomorrow as opposed to like Eagle scenarios, I imagine. So Howie Roseman's kind of geared more or leaned more toward the big school player in recent years, especially early on. And do you think there would be, I mean, let's just talk about a type from the beginning. Do you think a corner from Toledo would cause some concern? Yeah.
I do not think that is Howie Roseman's type. I think that would be a surprising pick. I mean, he hasn't used the only first-round pick he's ever used, I believe, on a non-Power 5 player was Carson Wentz.
You're right.
I believe that's right.
And sometimes he got criticized for not going for the big programs either, right? Like some of them, I shouldn't even say the not elite programs, but some of your Pac-12 or your Big 12 programs or that aren't SEC. You kept hearing SEC. I wrote a story a few years ago how the Eagles hadn't drafted guys from who had played in the college football playoff, right? They had only like 4 in X amount of years, and they weren't taking Alabama players for a period of time. And then you saw this correction in a major way, whether it was purposeful or not, Alabama, Georgia guys. And they've actually had some success there. Now, we need to see how the Georgia guys do, but certainly Jalen Hurts and Landon Dickerson and Devontae Smith, they hit on those 3 in particular.
Yeah, I feel like the Georgia thing is maybe hit a critical mass.
Sure.
Like, I mean, they're not going to, if there's a Georgia player at the top of their board, I don't think they're going to not take him, but I don't think that they want to add more Georgia guys. Do you?
Well, it is something, I don't know if they've gotten necessarily the return that they might have thought on some of the Georgia guys. Now it's still really early, but like you look at this draft, you look at Mims, the right tackle, and you just don't see guys who are like 6'7", 340 who can move like that. Then again, we said the same thing about Jordan Davis.
In this draft, you kind of do, right? Like it's a loaded offensive line draft.
Sure. Then Lassiter, the corner, he's someone too who, I mean, from a size, speed perspective, it's going to be appealing. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. They say don't scout the helmet, and I wrote this the other day when I had Mims as my mock. Like as my first round in the mock, is that there's a reason why they're taking Georgia players sometimes, and it's because like you go with the big skilled guys, you go with traits and skills early on, and Georgia gets guys with traits. So they, like, outside of Nakobe Dean, who fell to the 3rd round, Georgia doesn't have a lot of outliers. Georgia has guys who like you don't have to talk yourself into the size and the athleticism of a lot of these Georgia players.
So of the 10 players who I mentioned as potential first-round targets on the article that you can read if you are a diehard on all PHLY, you knowing these guys better at this point than I do, who is the one who you think is like the most likely Eagles type player?
Oh, Tyler Guyton. And, I obviously heard Dane talk about him. But the other one, and I can't say the last name, Kingsley. How do you pronounce the last name?
I think it's Suamatea.
Suamatea, who was a former top recruit, went to Oregon, transferred. It's actually funny as I'm watching the Senior Bowl today. It's like you have to put the second school designation for a lot of these guys because so many of them transfer now. I saw the rep between Latu and Kingsley.
They did a couple matchups today. He spent more time. He has played right tackle and left tackle. He played mostly right tackle today.
So they had that one-on-one, and they had 2 consecutive reps one-on-one. But like both of those, there was a point when Latu was at Washington and Kingsley was at Oregon, right? And now they've both transferred. I think though those offensive tackles are what I would really watch as far as the Eagles in the first round.
Just looking at it from like what seems like the scope of things and where guys are likely to be ranked, and Daniel Jeremiah came out with his top 50 today. Feels like just to me the kind of thing where the Eagles would look to trade back and maybe pick up some extra capital and take a tackle at the end of the first round.
Maybe so. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I don't know if there's a position that they trade up for. That's the thing. I think if they trade up, it's more for premium positions. And I don't know if they're going to trade up again for a defensive tackle, or it's a bad edge rusher class this year. So then you're going to trade up then for an offensive tackle, right? When you could probably trade back. I don't think they trade up for a corner. I think there's going to be some decent corners in the range where they're drafting, but I think actually second round's probably a better spot for corners. But when you look at strength,
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just saying when you look at the strength of this year's class, and I know it's still early, but it's an offensive heavy draft. We've seen years where there's that run on defensive linemen. This year, it's really wide receivers are a big strength here. Offensive tackles, all offensive line overall, big strength here. So those are the 2 positions that really jump out. There's some good corners, but it's not a good defensive front draft relative to past years.
I actually think if you were going to tell me right now the Eagles are going to trade up from 22, which I think is a long shot. I don't think they're going to do that. But I kind of think corner is the one that makes sense because it's the position where it's not quite as deep, it seems. Sure. There might be a guy who you view as a totally different tier who is worth getting. It's obviously a position of immense need long term, and like they're not going to draft a wide receiver in the first round, right? And complicate those dynamics that way. I think they need to add somebody, a tight end or a wide receiver at some point in the middle rounds, but I don't think they're going to trade up for the tackle either necessarily, unless it's like there's a run of like 3 or 4 guys who are all at the top tier and there's only one of them left. Maybe you move up a little bit for that, but like targeting a guy, corner is the one that sort of makes sense to me.
Yeah, and we have obviously ample time to talk about it, but both those
we're here. We're starting draft season.
Yeah, both the Bama corners, Kool-Aid, McKinstry, and Arnold, and then the Clemson corner. Those are the those are 3 that would kind of be near the top there. Although if you want to look for a sleeper for a trade up, and I think he'll go top 10, so it's not a possibility. But if he slips, Brock Bowers.
Yeah, you're gonna have to miss me with this. We're probably gonna be going over this for a while.
Okay, yeah, I just think Brock Bowers is. Brock Bowers is a special tight end prospect, and just a rare player. But
now the one thing I will say is the long history of tight ends taking a long time to make an impact in the NFL has changed a little bit over the recent. I mean, obviously we saw Sam Laporta's year, but tight ends have been able to make a quicker impact lately. But I do not think they're going to be trading up for Brock Bowers.
I'm saying we were talking about trade up candidates where you look to trade up. It's often when there's a drop off at the position, right? If you have 3 corners graded around the same, you're not going to give up picks, especially when you only have 1 third rounder this year. And you only have 1 third rounder most years, but you traded your third rounder. So your third rounder is your comp pick from, that you're expected to get. They have a lot of 5th round picks, but like, you don't want to give up one of those seconds. Right. So I think that there could be corners there at 22 for them. I do agree that's the most likely trade up spot, but I think corners, tackles, you'll find decent players there in the 20s.
What is your opinion, having watched all of these guys, on the quarterbacks who are here, Zach?
The quarterbacks who are there.
Yes.
Okay. Because I thought you were going to say the quarterbacks in general.
No. We'll save that for later.
Yeah, Michael Penix is.
So the guys who are here: Michael Penix from Washington,
yeah,
Bo Nix
and then
from
Bo
Oregon,
Nix, yeah,
Sam Hartman from Wake Forest and Notre Dame,
and
then on the other side, it's like a huge drop off to the quarterbacks on the other team. Spencer Rattler, who is like way smaller than I expected.
Yeah.
He's very small. Joe Milton from Tennessee, Michael Pratt from Tulane, and Gus Bradley's son, Carter Bradley, from South Alabama. I came up with a name for him last night. I didn't know that it was his son. Fran explained to me that this was Gus Bradley's son, and his name. I said, "What's his name?" And he said his name is Carter. And I said, "Oh," they went. We can go from the Gus bus to the Carter charter.
Well done, and experienced that Chick-fil-A in the South Alabama Student Union quite a bit, I imagine. I've been there, done that. So
you are sick.
So, anyways, of the quarterbacks there, Michael Penix would be the guy who I like the most. And I mean, that's not going on a ledge saying that, but dealt with a lot of injuries early on in his career when he was at Indiana.
Yeah,
and
people are. It seems like Bo Nix is going to be a first-round pick. This is weird to me.
I think Bo Nix will be a first-round pick. Yeah, I mean, the age thing, you kind of hold that against him, but like, he was awesome last year at Oregon. There are 5 quarterbacks who I think could go first round. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn here. I was speaking to Tyler Zulli in the office yesterday. Tyler's a big college football fan as well, and Tyler was saying, like, if you want a quarterback, you got to go this year, not next year, right? Next year's not considered as good of a quarterback class. Now, things can always shake out differently. We'll see, but this is a quarterback year, and obviously we know the top 3 or the Caleb Williams, Drake May, and then Jaden Daniels. But I think those 2 guys who are there, Michael Penix and Bo Nix, will both be first-round picks.
Just from watching them today, 1 day of practice, not a super noteworthy piece of information, but just from watching them today, Penix looked by far the best to me. Like the way the ball comes out of his hand, very accurate. Bo Nix struggled today. But these are like very difficult situations where you're working with guys you've never thrown to before and all that stuff. But Penix looked good.
I love a lefty. So there are not enough lefties playing quarterback in the NFL. So let's get him in the first round. I'm curious though. I'm watching this today, and the Noah Tongiai news breaks. That did not make the NFL Network. The talk of the NFL Network was Ben Johnson. Okay, so
very interesting.
Yeah, so it seemed to be Ben Johnson. There was a lot of Ben Johnson buzz down there, but like, what's the buzz? Because I've been there in those stands when something happens. I mean, vividly, I recall whether it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It's all kind of running together now. But when the Brian Flores lawsuit came out, right, and we're there and we're all sitting there, and it's like, man, it's like what everyone's talking about, right? So what was the buzz? Was it Ben Johnson? Was it coaching changes overall? Like, what's everyone talking about on the bleachers?
Yeah, when the Ben Johnson thing broke today, that was the talk of the stands for a little bit. Whether like he thought he wasn't going to get the job, or like he really does just want to finish things in Detroit, whatever it is. I don't know. I can't speak for Ben Johnson. It's an interesting thing to me. I mean, it seemed like people I was talking to over the past couple of weeks, it was like foregone conclusion that he was going to Washington and Adam Peters was going to get his man, right? And so definitely interesting. What about you?
Yeah, that did surprise me, right?
So who do you think?
Josina.
So I mean, we talked about Mike
I-
McDonald. I kind of think he's going to get one of these two jobs. Who's going to get the other one?
Well, just real quick, Josina Anderson had the report a few weeks ago that like Ben Johnson was asking for a lot of money, and then I saw Schefter had a tweet today that said like his what he was asking for was scaring teams off a bit.
Give me a break.
So I don't know if that factored into things or not, but yeah,
I
that
actually
did surprise
missed
me.
who tweeted this, but they were right, and so I apologize. But like, there's no salary cap for coaches. Ask for what you want. Like, you can be scared off by the salary demand of a head coach. Hire the guy you want to hire.
Fair.
It's not like he's taking away it's not like a quarterback where you can't all of a sudden you can't pay an edge rusher. Like, give me a break.
Yeah, but there's always a price that you consider too much, right?
Yeah, but
I don't know.
I can't imagine he was asking for like $500 million. Like, he was asking for something within the range of a head coach salary. Like, if you want him, get him. I'm not saying that I would definitely hire him either. I'm just saying, like, give me a break with he was asking for too much money.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics there. That's just something that has come out since. So where do they turn? I mean, Mike McDonald's interesting to me, right? Actually Pleasant from the Ravens too is someone who's held in high regard. He's the assistant head coach there, Aubrey Pleasant. Now, when you look at it, like, I would talk to Mike Vrabel. I think Mike Vrabel's a really good coach. I don't know what the interest is there between Dan Quinn and Mike Vrabel. I might kind of steer toward Vrabel, but
I think if you're the Eagles, we're talking about having these guys in the division, I think you would have been a little bit worried about Ben Johnson as a guy you had to go up against twice a year. I don't think you need to worry about Mike Vrabel. I mean, or Dan Quinn. I mean, like, yeah, he's going to get more out of them, right? But like, I don't know. It's like a Mike Vrabel team is not difficult to prepare for.
Well, frankly, I think if you're an Eagles fan, and if you're watching this right now, you're an Eagles fan, I presume, you want them to hire Dan Quinn, because that weakens the Cowboys right away. Like, the Commanders are going to take some time. The Cowboys, I saw a quote from Jerry Jones today that like they're all in for next year, right? Which which struck me as odd, because I thought they were all in for last year too. I didn't. But yeah, if you're trying to get a D coordinator now maybe Al Harris is the guy, right? And you promote him, and it's seamless. But I think Dan Quinn is a high level coordinator. So yeah, just like Dean said there, if Dan Quinn goes to Washington, I think that weakens that Cowboys coaching staff. But
especially if he brings Chip, that would be fun. He play against Chip twice a year.
Sure. At the site of the first Chip game.
Imagine if Josh Harris, relents to Ben Johnson's demand. He's like, all right, we're going to pay you what you need. And then the next day announces that the Sixers have traded Tyrese Maxey because they're not going to be able to afford his long-term extension now because he's got Ben Johnson instead.
I think those are coming from two separate pots, but sure. But yeah, I don't know where they turn. Mike McDonald's interesting to me. And I think if you're not fixated on the offensive head coach part of it, one thing that I was really impressed with Mike McDonald all year, but I was impressed with him this past weekend, because what jumped out to me is like Andy Reid had a great initial script, right? They scored early, and then the Ravens adjusted and just shut them down. Just shut them down. And that to me is a sign. Now, a head coach is more, it's about more than scheme, right? There's a difference between being a good coordinator and a good coach. But when you look at like the merit of what Mike McDonald's done, and he's worked in an outstanding organization there. He's been at Michigan, right? He's been at Georgia. I think that's something that they should look hard at. But they're talking to Aaron Glenn today too.
Is it Aaron Glenn or Glenn Aaron?
It's Aaron Glenn.
Glenn Aaron Hill.
So I don't know where they turn. Frankly, I thought at the beginning it was going to be Belichick.
What do you make of this? Washington. No Belichick.
Yeah, clearly the Falcons. Now I'd like Raheem Morris, so I don't think it's not higher.
Just you get a zip file. Use we transfer and send Josh Harris your folder. See if it moves him.
I mean, if you watch that Saban Belichick documentary, but no, I'm curious to see where they turn, and then Seattle's still out there as well. I keep seeing, don't sleep on Mike Kafka in Seattle, which would strike me as very odd. But you have these pick of coaches, and you go with Kafka. But still, the Ben Johnson thing did throw a wrench in what people were expecting. So that was the buzz. There was Ben Johnson. What else were people talking about on the sideline?
Well, Zach, good question, because I can show you a video of the kinds of things we were talking about on the sidelines. Now, you can read the collection of options for the Eagles if you are a diehard. We hope that you become a diehard if you are not yet a diehard. But before we get there, I had a chance to talk to Olivia Reiner from the Inquirer about the ways in which her work was maybe affecting your livelihood, Zach. So let's listen to that now.
Buddy, well, Wulf here at the Senior Bowl again with the award-winning journalist Olivia Reiner. Olivia, first of all, how are you?
I'm doing well, though. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us here. Now, busy travel week for you. Not only are you here in Alabama, you were in Baltimore over the weekend. You got the Jason Kelce scoop. What was the story behind that?
Yeah, so obviously that was like the dream would be to talk to Kelce after the game, and I went to that game with the hope that potentially I would see him or run into him somehow, but I knew that, like I said, was kind of like the lofty goal. So that wasn't, when I was going down after the game, that wasn't my backup plan. I had a backup plan. If I wasn't able
What was
to
the backup
find,
plan?
just to kind of write a little bit more generally about the Chiefs going back to the Super Bowl for a second consecutive season, unlike the Eagles, kind of how they were able to do that despite going through some adversity earlier in the season and talking to some of the players. But that quickly went out the window. So when I went down there, I was just kind of, my first, what I thought to do was just to follow Travis around.
Smart.
Until I found potentially Jason. And that's essentially what happened.
Did you get caught up in the Swift of it all?
I did. Yeah, that ended up being a byproduct of my expedition, was seeing the two of them, Travis and Taylor.
And so was it like most people were following Taylor and you were off for
Correct.
Jason?
Correct.
Nice.
I got a video of Travis and Taylor kind of celebrating after the game, and then once that was done, I was like, okay. So Travis walked up to the stage to accept, like, with the rest of his team, the AFC title. And then once I knew where he was and that he was kind of, going to be over there, I turned around more or less, and there Jason was. So it worked out really well.
I know he was happy to see you, I imagine.
Yeah, I think he was happy to just be there and happy to see a lot of people. A lot of people wanted to talk to him. A lot of people wanted photos with him. So I was lucky enough to get a few minutes with him. So it worked out.
Generally speaking, how was first full year on the Eagles beat for you?
Oh, it was really nice. I'm very lucky to work with some really awesome, experienced people who guided me along the right way. So we've got a good team, and I enjoyed it. It was kind of like a little bit familiar going back to the NFL after I covered the Packers for 3 years and then moved to the Flyers beat. So covered that team for a couple seasons and now back in the NFL. So there are familiar aspects of covering an NFL team, and I enjoyed that. I especially enjoyed the schedule compared to the NHL season.
Yes.
A little less chaotic, but all in all, good season, a lot of good stories, all good stuff.
And you're okay knowing that you getting that Jason Kelce scoop ruined Zach's
I'm so sorry.
Couple hours of his life?
Sorry, Zach. I love Zach a lot. I have a lot of respect for Zach. So if he is at all, if he has those feelings, it means a lot to me.
You know what though, you have gotten yourselves back in our good graces because you did hook me up with sunscreen. So
you're welcome.
You have saved the day on that front. What do you make of Mobile? Did you come here when you were covering the Packers?
No, this is actually my first experience, so I'm really enjoying it so far. I really didn't know what to expect, and to me, this is a lot. I think that this is a good turnout. I don't know. Apparently, compared to maybe some pre-pandemic years, it might not be as well attended, but to me, this is a lot of people for this event. It's fun to see. Good to see some football. It feels like it's been so long for us.
There you go. Maybe better than the football we saw at the end of the season.
Sure.
All right. Well, Olivia, thank you so much for taking the time. That'll do it for PHLY. Thanks for listening.
Were you negatively affected by that Kelsey interview, Zach?
Well, I mean, I was envious. All right. Now, I really respected Olivia. Like, she did great work there. She got the story. She's
Olivia.
She's the sports writer of the. She's a Pennsylvania State Sports Writer of the Year. And she's done a terrific job.
I mean, hold on. Co
with Mike Jensen, who's awesome.
Yeah.
But still, yeah. No, I'm saying she's
got to share the crown. I mean,
she's awesome.
Let's be
like,
accurate.
So it didn't necessarily throw a wrench because it bothers me more if we're both in the locker room together and she gets something that I don't, right? Or like we're both working on something and she gets something that I don't. Like we're listening, I was at the Inquirer for 7 years. I did like the postseason circuit. I loved it. It was so much fun. And I really respect that because it's hard as hell, like to go there knowing that you need to find a story for your readership. How are you going to do it? Like you don't have the relationships in the locker room. Like I remember when Gus Bradley was a candidate being down in Washington, when they beat the then Washington football team. Right. I remember being in Carolina. I remember being when Sean McDermott got to the Super Bowl. I remember being out in Denver for a Peyton Manning, Tom Brady game. So that's a way of saying that at the Inquirer, that's like part of what you do. I think I would probably have to give like a convincing argument why I would be covering playoff games at PHLY.
You could have driven down though. Easy one to get to.
Yeah, I probably in hindsight, I probably could have made that. But no, I have so much respect for her, and she delivered that. That's not handed to you. You got to get on the field. You got to find Jason. You got to get Jason being willing to talk, and you got to get Jason to be honest too. And so she did awesome, and she deserved that. So I was envious of the story for sure. Like I saw it and I said, damn, I wish I got that. But I will say it didn't pain me the same way if we were both working on who the Eagles were hiring.
But so then let me ask you this, Zach. Why does it pain you so much to be asleep when the news of Kellen Moore breaks, when everybody's getting that anyway? You're not breaking that.
Well, I mean, you hope you're on top of it, but also, when it happens, you want people to come to you for what you think, and if you're 8 hours late on that, I think
you should give yourself the same grace for that you're giving yourself for the Kelsey thing. It's much less. It's actually much less of a thing because it's not. All you're talking about is putting out a couple tweets.
No, I could have written something. We could have done an emergency show on Saturday night.
I was not going to do an emergency show Saturday night.
I could have done a video on demand. I should have been in a better position on Saturday night. The game Sunday.
I did see we have a comment from a pharmacist, DFOP, who is making the case that you should not be giving Advil PM such gas. You don't need the Advil, and you need just some over the counter Benadryl to get you to sleep.
My bad. I'm sorry. Yeah, I will take that. It's kind of like what I had in the medicine cabinet.
I think this is an old Shields mom tip that you never need the brand name thing. It's all, you just get the generics.
Yeah, it's just what I had in the medicine cabinet. So that's all it was. But my fault there.
Maybe get some codeine next time in the medicine cabinet.
Yeah, why not? But let me ask you too. What's it like down in Mobile? Like every time I'm there, it seems like it's grown a bit since the year before. The event changed. It used to be at Lee Peebles. Now it's at South Alabama. Is it different?
A lot of Senior Bowl hipsterism going on from those of us who have been here, who have been coming here for over a decade now, because it has gotten not as good for the media. I think
Sure.
part of that is because it has maybe made it easier to attract the players. There is like the media access is much less. It used to be you got to be like right on the sidelines during practice, watching practice. Now it's much more segmented. There used to be like times for everybody to talk to the players. Like on a Monday before practices started, there was like an hour when you got to talk to the players from every team. That has been eliminated. It used to be like there was like a radio row that was like in the player hotel, and now you need credentials to get there. But the flip side is they're attracting better talent in theory. I don't know if that's actually how it's played out in practice, but it's still good. It's still fun. It's still a great way to see all of these players on the field. The last time you'll see them on the field before the draft. The combine is great. You need those measurables, but this is the last time to see them in action.
Good point.
And it's also great because it's a small town, the
Sure.
downtown of Mobile, and so you pop into the different restaurants and bars, and there are different familiar faces from the NFL. I think that too. It's like we talked about at the beginning. Like not all the head coaches and GMs are necessarily coming like they used to, but it's still some fun people watching.
Yeah, and that's the cool part about like Mobile and Indianapolis for the combine too, is that you're all kind of scattered in a central place. You're generally going to the same restaurants or coffee shops or bars, and if you did a Senior Bowl in a different city, it wouldn't have that same effect. Same way if the combine moved, right? If the combine was in Los Angeles, people would be all over the place, right?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the convention element that you get, and that's even more the case in Alabama, because there's like 4 or 5 hotels in the downtown area. There's a lot of people who actually have to stay on the outskirts and then get into downtown. So yeah, I'm like I said at the top of the show, I have FOMO. I am envious of you and living vicariously through all the reporters down there.
FOMO better than MoFo.
I would say so. I would say so. How was the show yesterday?
Right at the top, it was a good show. He did a good job running the show. Love it.
Emily said
he did a great job.
Emily said, "Why are you nervous?" Like I was like really prepared. She's like, "I've never seen you, nervous for a show." I said, "Bo is so good at running, the show, at being like the point guard. I would say even more than the point guard, the quarterback, right? The point guard's more of the distributor. You are, you're central to the offense, right? So now, like the backup quarterback gets in, and I got to know all the play calls. I got to know the ins. I got to know the opens, the ins and outs. I got to have my eye on the time. I got to listen to what he's saying, Rich, so I can have the conversation, but also be aware of like what is, we need to get to this ad break. And then also what's the chat saying? Is there a super chat? I had a few things I want to get into. You don't want to go too deep on a single topic, but you don't want to go bare. So this was all stuff that I was playing out. I mapped out what the show would be, and it was fun. I have more respect for you.
Well, that's kind of you to say. I appreciate that, but it didn't. There was no drop off. You did a good job running the show. How did it feel?
It was fun. Yeah, Rich was great to speak with. Julia, as always, did an amazing job, and it was fun.
But yes, as Ryan says in the chat, I do have one complaint about the show.
I love you at the end.
Yeah.
You know what?
Your emotions,
I am, though. It's like your emotions and my emotions are different. I love when Tony Kornheiser says, we'll do better tomorrow, or it'll be a better show tomorrow. Something along those lines. That's a sentiment.
But what a rude thing to say in front of Rich.
No, it's more. You should want to be better every day, right? I don't want to be worse tomorrow. I don't want to be the same tomorrow. I know today has not been my best show. I will not be on the show tomorrow. Please. Thursday, I'm going to bring it. Friday, I'm going to bring it. So yeah, like I very much feel like that's it. If your sentiment is I love you to the crowd, my sentiment is I promise you a better show tomorrow.
I think that's sweet.
Yeah.
even if you're, thumbing your nose at the beloved listeners and viewers.
Never. By the way, if I put in the Discord, and if you are a diehard, that's part of the benefit is you have the Discord channel. You can submit questions.
Discord right here.
I see what you did there. You can submit questions in the diehard in the Eagles mailbag tab, and I will answer every single question. I got that inspiration from Charlie O'Connor. I used to pick like 8 or 10. I'm going to answer every question within reason, right? Like if you're asking for honeymoon details or something like that, don't need to do that. But like within reason.
Why would you take it there of all places?
No, I'm saying like this is not the forum for like personal stuff, but I will answer what.
Of all the things you could have said that were unreasonable, you had to go to your own honeymoon?
Well, you always bring that up to me, right?
I know, but some people don't know that background story. You're talking about like where you went on your honeymoon. The way that you said it was you're talking about, the details of the down and dirty.
That's not at all what I was referring to, Bo. I was referring to. Come on. Okay.
Point being, an inappropriate question for a mailbag, but
Now, point being, I will take all your Eagles questions. I will take if you have like industry questions, if you have anything like that, I'd be happy to answer. So, put that in the Discord, and I will coordinate with Bo when his Senior Bowl content's coming out. But I'm going to work on that tomorrow, and it could run on Thursday or Friday.
Sounds good. We look forward to that. Remember, you can be a diehard on allphly.com. Get a good deal, and you also get, in addition to all that content, you get and the Discord, you get discounts on the merch. So all that stuff is worth it. And make sure that you are liking and subscribing, doing all that stuff on the YouTube page. Thank you to everybody for watching and listening today. I will be back tomorrow with Francis Duffy to talk Senior Bowl quackatology. We will have at that point 2 practices each from the American and national teams down here in Mobile to talk about. We're going to try to match guys who might make sense for the Eagles in different rounds. And then on Thursday, Zach and Handsome Rich back in the saddle before Zach and I are back together in person on Friday. So a fun week of shows here on PHLY. Thank you to Julia.
And then Vegas next week. Make sure let's just keep saying that. We'll be on the scene in Vegas next week. So pump for that.
And then Vegas next week. 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 And then Vegas next week.
All right, we got it.
And then Vegas next week. Well, he told me to keep saying it. And then Vegas next week.
You don't have to keep saying it. I just wanted to
and
reinforce that.
Vegas next week.
I just want to reinforce that. The company's making a big investment in having us on Radio Row, and we will be there giving you the sights and sounds and scenes and interviews, and it's going to be fun.
And then Vegas next week. So for all of us here at PHLY, we thank you for listening. We will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, for Zach, we love you.
We all silly like the mayor.